Imagine standing on a quiet hill at sunrise, the world just beginning to stir. If you close your eyes and listen, maybe you can hear the distant echo of sandals on stone, the steady rhythm of progress. Rome was not built in a day. It rose slowly, brick by brick, dream by dream, on the backbone of bold ideas and relentless innovation. Long before skyscrapers or smartphones, there was a city that dared to reshape the land itself. The Romans did not just build for their own comfort or glory. They built for generations yet to come. In ancient times, when most people traveled by dusty paths or followed the curves of rivers, Roman roads cut straight through mountains and forests, connecting distant towns as if drawing a new map of the world. Soldiers marched along these stones. Merchants carried silk and spices, and news traveled faster than ever before. But Roman genius did not stop at roads. They tamed rivers, carved aqueducts across valleys, and mixed a kind of concrete that somehow grew stronger with every passing year. Imagine walking beneath the great dome of the Pantheon, where birds still circle high above, and realizing that the same walls have stood for nearly 2,000 years. Every crack and shadow holds stories, secrets of a people who believed in building for eternity. What did these inventors dream of as they worked? Did they wonder if anyone would remember their names? Or did they simply hope to make life a little easier, a little safer, a little more beautiful for those who would come after? Today, we step into that story. We follow the footsteps of the Romans, exploring the inventions that shaped their world and ours. From the roads beneath our feet to the arches above our heads, these are not just relics of the past. They are living proof that imagination and determination can outlast even the mightiest empires. If you love discovering the hidden threads that tie our world together, you are in the right place. Stick around, and together we will uncover how Rome built not just a city, but a legacy that still echoes across the centuries. And if you enjoy this journey, do not forget to like this video, share it with friends who love history, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires to keep exploring the wonders of the ancient world. Picture this. You're standing on a dusty hill outside Rome, watching as thousands of soldiers march in perfect formation down a stone highway that stretches beyond the horizon. The sound of their synchronized steps echoes like thunder, and you realize you're witnessing something that would change the world forever. The Romans didn't just build roads, they engineered destiny itself. When we say all roads lead to Rome, we're talking about over 250,000 miles of highways that connected an empire spanning 3 continents. To put that into perspective, that's enough road to circle the earth 10 times over. But here's what makes these roads truly remarkable. They weren't just paths worn down by countless feet and wheels. Each Roman road was a masterpiece of engineering, built in layers like a carefully crafted cake. First came the foundation, massive stones called the statumen, laid deep into the earth. Then a layer of smaller rocks and gravel, followed by fine sand and mortar, and finally, those iconic flat stones we still see today, fitted together so perfectly that not even a knife blade could slip between them. The genius wasn't just in the construction, it was in the planning. Roman engineers had this incredible tool called a groma, which looked like a simple wooden cross with weighted strings hanging from each arm. With this humble device, they could survey land and create roads so straight they seemed to defy nature itself. Mountains? They'd tunnel through them or carve around them with mathematical precision. Rivers? They'd bridge them with arches that still stand today. Swamps? They'd drain them or build elevated causeways that rose above the marshy ground like stone serpents. These weren't just impressive feats of engineering, they were strategic weapons. A Roman legion could march 25 miles in a single day on these roads, covering ground that would take other armies weeks to traverse. Imagine being an enemy commander, receiving reports that Roman forces were approaching your city, only to learn they'd covered impossible distances in record time. The psychological impact alone was devastating. But the roads served another purpose that was perhaps even more powerful than military might. They bound the empire together with invisible threads of commerce and culture. A merchant in Britain could load his cart with tin and wool, knowing that smooth stone highways would carry him safely to markets in Spain or Egypt. A letter written in northern Gaul could reach Rome in just 7 days, traveling along a network so efficient that it wouldn't be matched again for over 1,000 years. And here's a detail that shows just how forward-thinking the Romans were. They built their roads with a slight crown in the center, so rainwater would drain off to the sides into carefully constructed ditches. They even placed milestones every Roman mile. That's about 4,854 feet, so travelers always knew exactly where they were and how far they had to go. The most fascinating part? Many of these ancient highways still exist today, buried beneath our modern roads. In some places in Europe, you can actually see the original Roman stones, worn smooth by 2,000 years of feet, hooves, and wheels. Traffic patterns that were established before Christ was born still guide how we move through the world today. When Roman engineers looked at a landscape, they didn't see obstacles. They saw opportunities to connect, to unite, to build something permanent. Every stone they laid was placed with the confidence that their empire would last forever. And in a way, it has. Because every time you drive on a straight highway, every time you follow a route that seems almost too perfect to be natural, you might just be traveling on the ghost of a Roman road, following paths carved by engineers who believed they were building for eternity. But roads were just the beginning of Rome's engineering revolution. Now, imagine you're walking through Rome today, running your hand along a wall that's nearly 2,000 years old. The stone feels solid, unshakable, as if it could stand for another 2 millennia. That's not stone you're touching. It's concrete, Roman concrete. And here's the mind-bending part. It's actually stronger now than the day it was built. This seems impossible, doesn't it? We live in an age where our concrete highways crack after a few harsh winters, where our buildings need constant repair, where nothing seems built to last. Yet somehow, ancient Roman engineers created a material that literally improves with age, like a fine wine getting better in the cellar. The secret lay hidden for over 1,000 years, buried in the ruins of the empire itself. When Rome fell, so did the knowledge of how to make this miraculous concrete. Medieval builders tried desperately to recreate it, mixing lime and water and whatever they could find, but their structures crumbled while Roman buildings stood like silent guardians of a lost art. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, the same volcano that buried Pompeii. Roman engineers had discovered something extraordinary in the volcanic ash around the Bay of Naples, near a little town called Pozzuoli. This ash, which they called pulvis putillanus, wasn't just any ordinary volcanic material. It contained a perfect blend of silica and alumina that, when mixed with lime and water, created something that seemed to defy the laws of nature. But here's where the story gets truly fascinating. Modern scientists, armed with electron microscopes and chemical analysis tools that would seem like magic to ancient Romans, have discovered why this concrete grows stronger over time. When seawater or rainwater seeps into Roman concrete, instead of causing it to deteriorate like modern concrete, it triggers a chemical reaction with the volcanic ash. Tiny crystals begin to form, filling in microscopic cracks and actually reinforcing the structure. It's as if the concrete heals itself, becoming more resilient with each passing storm. The Romans didn't understand the chemistry behind their discovery, but they knew they had stumbled upon something revolutionary. They began experimenting, creating different mixes for different purposes. For underwater construction, they used a higher concentration of volcanic ash. For massive domes and vaults, they lightened the mixture with pumice, creating a material that was both strong and surprisingly light. And nowhere is this genius more evident than in the Pantheon, that magnificent temple in the heart of Rome. Step inside, and you'll find yourself standing beneath the largest unreinforced concrete dome ever built. No steel rebar, no modern supports, just Roman concrete holding up a dome that spans 142 feet across. The ceiling seems to float above you, pierced by a single opening called the oculus that lets in a shaft of sunlight that moves across the walls like a celestial clock. What's remarkable is that modern engineers still can't fully explain how the Romans did it. The dome gets thinner as it rises, and the concrete mixture changes throughout the structure, becoming lighter toward the top. They mixed in pottery shards and pumice, creating air pockets that reduced weight without sacrificing strength. Every detail was calculated with a precision that seems almost supernatural. But perhaps the most moving aspect of Roman concrete isn't its technical brilliance. It's what it represents. Every crack you see in these ancient walls tells a story. It's a whisper of forgotten knowledge, a testament to minds that refuse to build for just their own lifetimes. These engineers weren't thinking in quarters or fiscal years. They were building for eternity. Think about that for a moment. A Roman architect designing a building knew that his grandchildren's grandchildren might never see it completed. Yet he poured his heart into perfecting every detail, knowing that centuries later, people would walk through spaces he created and marvel at what human ingenuity could achieve. Today, scientists around the world are working frantically to recreate Roman concrete, not just out of historical curiosity, but out of desperate need. Our modern concrete industry produces massive amounts of carbon dioxide, contributing significantly to climate change. Roman concrete, made with volcanic ash and lime, had a much smaller environmental footprint. If we could master their techniques, we might solve two problems at once: building structures that last millennia while protecting the planet that houses them. The irony is breathtaking. We've split the atom, sent humans to the moon, and connected the entire world through the internet. Yet we're still trying to figure out how ancient Romans mixed rocks and ash to create something stronger than anything we can manufacture today. Every time you walk past a concrete building, every time you drive on a concrete highway, you're experiencing the legacy of Roman innovation. But you're also witnessing our limitations, because while we can copy their techniques, we're still struggling to match their mindset. They built with the confidence that their civilization would endure forever, and in a way, they were right. Their concrete has outlasted their empire, their language, even their gods. Are you fascinated by this ancient legacy? Then comment your thoughts, like the video, share it with fellow history lovers, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more epic journeys into the past. But Roman engineering genius didn't stop with roads and concrete. They had an even more ambitious project, bringing the power of rivers themselves to serve their growing cities. Close your eyes and imagine waking up in ancient Rome at the height of the empire. You step outside your home, and the first thing you hear isn't the clatter of carts or the shouts of merchants. It's the gentle sound of flowing water. Fountains bubble on every street corner, water cascades down ornate facades, and the air itself seems fresher, cleaner, alive with the promise of endless abundance. This wasn't magic. This was engineering on a scale that defied belief. Rome had tamed rivers that flowed hundreds of miles away, bent them to its will, and brought their life-giving waters directly into the heart of the city. 11 magnificent aqueducts stretched across the countryside like stone serpents, delivering an almost incomprehensible 200 million gallons of fresh water every single day. To put that into perspective, that's enough water to fill about 300 Olympic-sized swimming pools daily. But the Romans weren't using this water just to survive. They were using it to transform what it meant to be civilized. The story begins with a problem that every growing city faces. Where do you find enough clean water for 1 million people? Most ancient cities were built near rivers or lakes, but Rome had grown far beyond what the muddy Tiber could provide. The river was polluted, unreliable, and frankly, not nearly grand enough for a people who saw themselves as masters of the world. So Roman engineers looked to the hills and mountains surrounding their city, where crystal-clear springs bubbled up from deep underground. The nearest good water source was miles away, but distance had never stopped the Romans before. If they could move armies across continents, surely they could move water across the countryside. The genius wasn't just in deciding to bring distant water to Rome, it was in how they did it. Roman aqueducts weren't simply pipes or channels. They were marvels of mathematical precision that had to maintain a gentle, constant slope over dozens of miles. Too steep, and the rushing water would destroy the structure. Too flat, and the water would stagnate or stop flowing altogether. The Romans calculated that for every mile of aqueduct, the water level could drop no more than a few feet. Imagine surveying a path from a mountain spring to Rome, over hills and valleys, through forests and farmland, and maintaining that precise angle across the entire distance. One mistake, one miscalculation, and months of work would be worthless. But perhaps the most breathtaking part of these aqueducts were the bridges, those soaring stone arches that carried water channels high above valleys and rivers. The Pont du Gard in southern France still stands today, a three-tiered masterpiece that rises nearly 200 feet into the sky. When you stand beneath it, you feel dwarfed not just by its size, but by the ambition it represents. Here's something that will blow your mind. The Romans were so confident in their engineering that they built these massive stone bridges without using any mortar between the stones. Each block was cut so precisely that they locked together like pieces of a three-dimensional puzzle, held in place by gravity and geometry alone. 2,000 years later, these bridges are still carrying water, or at least they would be if the Romans were still around to maintain them. Once the water reached Rome, the real magic began. The aqueducts fed into a complex distribution system that brought running water to every neighborhood in the city. Public fountains provided free, fresh water to anyone who needed it. Wealthy homes had private connections that brought water directly to their kitchens and gardens. And perhaps most remarkably of all, Rome had public toilets with running water. Actual flush toilets, centuries before most of the world would even dream of such luxury. The Romans took this abundance of water and turned it into art. Fountains weren't just functional. They were sculptures that celebrated the power and beauty of flowing water. The sound of water became the soundtrack of Roman life, a constant reminder that their city was blessed by the gods themselves. But here's where Roman ingenuity gets truly impressive. All this water created a new problem. What happens when buildings catch fire in a city where most structures are made of wood and heated by open flames? The Romans invented the world's first professional fire brigade, called the Vigiles, who used the abundant aqueduct water pumped through ingenious siphon systems to fight fires before they could destroy entire neighborhoods. These early firefighters didn't just pour water on flames, they used bronze pumps and leather hoses to direct pressurized streams exactly where they were needed. They had ladders, axes, and even early versions of what we'd recognize as fire blankets. Marcus Crassus, one of Rome's richest men, actually made part of his fortune by owning a private fire brigade that would rush to burning buildings and offer to buy them at bargain prices before putting out the flames. Water in Rome wasn't just a necessity, it was a symbol of power, a declaration that said, "We command rivers to bend to our will. We make the distant mountains serve our needs. We turn scarcity into abundance through the sheer force of human ingenuity." Think about what this meant to people visiting Rome for the first time. They'd travel for weeks through dusty roads, stopping at wells and streams, carefully rationing their water supplies. Then they'd crest a hill and see the city spread before them, sparkling with fountains, alive with the sound of rushing water. It must have seemed like they'd stumbled into the realm of the gods themselves. The aqueducts weren't just engineering marvels. They were propaganda carved in stone. Every arch, every channel, every fountain whispered the same message. Rome can do the impossible. Rome can bring the power of nature itself into the service of civilization. And here's the most poignant part of this story. When the barbarian invasions finally came, when the Western Roman Empire began to crumble, one of the first things that happened was the cutting of the aqueducts. Enemy armies knew that if you wanted to break Rome, you didn't attack its walls. You attacked its water supply. As the aqueducts fell into disrepair, the fountains dried up, the public baths closed, and the great city that had once seemed eternal began its slow decline. It would be over 1,000 years before any European city would again enjoy the luxury of running water that the Romans had taken for granted. Today, when we turn on a tap and expect clean water to flow instantly, when we flush toilets without thinking, when we take long showers and water our gardens, we're living with amenities that most of human history would have considered miraculous. We owe that expectation of abundance, that sense that civilization should provide for our most basic needs, to Roman engineers who refused to accept that water was scarce. But even beyond roads, concrete, and aqueducts, the Romans created countless smaller innovations that we've completely forgotten. Ingenious solutions to everyday problems that reveal minds always searching for better ways to live. Sometimes the most revolutionary changes happen in the quietest moments. Picture a Roman scholar in his private study, late at night, oil lamp flickering as he turns the page of a book. Not a scroll that he has to awkwardly unroll with both hands, constantly rewinding as he reads, but an actual book, pages bound together that he can flip through with ease, bookmark his place, and set aside without losing his spot. This simple act, something we do without thinking every day, was once a groundbreaking innovation. The Romans invented the codex, the bound book, and in doing so, they changed how human knowledge would be stored and shared forever. Before Roman codices, if you wanted to reference a specific passage in the middle of a lengthy scroll, you'd have to unroll the entire thing, scanning through hundreds of feet of papyrus or parchment. Imagine trying to look up a recipe in a cookbook that was 20 feet long and had to be completely unrolled every time you wanted to find the ingredients list. Roman books solved this problem so elegantly that we're still using essentially the same design 2,000 years later. But the genius of Roman innovation wasn't limited to grand public works or literary advances. They had this remarkable ability to see problems that everyone else just accepted as facts of life, then engineer solutions that seem obvious only in hindsight. Take medical care, for instance. If you needed surgery in most ancient cultures, you'd be lucky to survive the procedure, let alone heal properly afterward. Roman military doctors, faced with the constant challenge of treating wounded soldiers, developed surgical instruments that look eerily familiar to anyone who's ever been in a modern operating room. They created forceps for grasping and extracting objects, scalpels with interchangeable blades for different types of incisions, and even specialized bone drills for skull surgeries. One Roman surgical kit found by archaeologists contained over 150 different instruments, each designed for a specific medical purpose. The most remarkable part? Many of these tools would fit perfectly into a contemporary surgeon's hands. Roman doctors understood something that much of the world would forget for centuries after the empire's fall: that cleanliness and precision could mean the difference between life and death. They sterilized their instruments, used opium and other herbs for pain relief, and developed techniques for setting broken bones that wouldn't be improved upon until the modern era. But perhaps nothing shows Roman ingenuity better than how they solved the problem of staying warm during cold winters. While people throughout most of the ancient world huddled around smoky fires that filled their homes with dangerous fumes, Romans were enjoying what was essentially central heating. The Hypocaust system was pure genius in its simplicity. Roman engineers would build their floors on short pillars, creating a hollow space underneath. Then they'd light a fire in a furnace room, usually located outside the main building, and channel the hot air and smoke through this underfloor cavity. The warm air would circulate beneath the entire house, heating the floors and walls before venting safely outside through flues built into the walls. Walking into a Roman villa on a winter day was like stepping into a different world. While snow might be falling outside, inside you could walk barefoot on pleasantly warm floors. The heat was even, consistent, and completely smoke-free. Wealthy Romans took this luxury so much for granted that they heated not just their homes, but their public baths, which could accommodate hundreds of people at once in perfectly climate-controlled comfort. The Romans didn't stop at personal comfort. They revolutionized urban living in ways that most people never think about. They invented proper street sanitation, with teams of slaves who swept and cleaned the roads every day. They created the world's first apartment buildings, called insulae, some reaching 6 or 7 stories high to house Rome's growing population. They even invented what we might recognize as the world's first newspapers. The Acta Diurna, or daily acts, were handwritten notices posted in public squares that reported on government proceedings, military victories, public works projects, and even social gossip. Citizens would gather around these postings each day to catch up on the latest news, much like we scroll through social media feeds today. And here's something that will make you smile. Romans invented fast food. They had taverns called thermopolia, where busy city dwellers could grab quick meals from large clay pots built into marble counters. These weren't fancy restaurants. They were the ancient equivalent of grabbing a sandwich on your lunch break. Archaeological evidence shows that these establishments were everywhere in Roman cities, serving everything from wine and bread to more elaborate stews and roasted meats. Even Roman children benefited from innovations we still use today. They played with dolls that had movable arms and legs, jointed like modern action figures. They had board games with dice and playing pieces, toys with wheels, and even primitive versions of what we'd recognize as yo-yos. But perhaps the most touching of Roman innovations were the small gestures of humanity they built into daily life. They created memorial stones for beloved pets, complete with touching epitaphs. They developed early forms of life insurance and retirement benefits for soldiers. They even invented wedding rings worn on the fourth finger of the left hand, based on the belief that a vein in that finger led directly to the heart. The Romans had this remarkable ability to take the mundane aspects of human existence and ask, how can we make this better? They didn't just accept discomfort, inconvenience, or inefficiency as inevitable parts of life. Instead, they approached every problem with the same engineering mindset that built their aqueducts and roads. What's most remarkable is how many of these innovations simply disappeared when the empire fell. For centuries after Rome's collapse, Europeans went back to using scrolls instead of bound books, abandoned central heating in favor of dangerous open fires, and lost the medical knowledge that had saved countless lives. It wasn't until the Renaissance, over 1,000 years later, that many of these Roman innovations were rediscovered and reinvented. Scholars marveling over new surgical techniques were often unknowingly recreating procedures that Roman doctors had perfected centuries earlier. This speaks to something profound about the Roman character. They weren't content with just conquering territories or building monuments. They wanted to improve the actual experience of being human. They believed that civilization meant more than just having laws and armies. It meant creating a world where people could live with dignity, comfort, and even beauty in their daily lives. Every time you flip through a book, every time you visit a doctor who uses precise instruments, every time you enjoy the warmth of central heating, you're benefiting from the Roman conviction that life can always be made a little bit better through human ingenuity and care. But all of this leads to a deeper question about the Roman legacy and what it means for us today. So here we stand, 2,000 years later, living in a world that the Romans helped create, often without even realizing it. Every morning when you drive to work on a straight highway, when you turn on a tap and expect clean water to flow, when you pick up a book or step into a heated building, you're experiencing echoes of Roman innovation that have rippled across centuries. The Romans didn't just build an empire, they built the blueprint of modernity itself. But here's what makes their story so profound. Their inventions weren't just clever solutions to immediate problems. They were declarations of faith in the future, bold statements that said, "We are here to stay, and we're going to make the world better for everyone who comes after us." And stay they did. Not in the way they expected, perhaps. The legions are gone. The emperors are dust, and Latin is spoken only in academic halls and religious ceremonies. But the Roman spirit, that relentless drive to improve, to build, to solve problems through human ingenuity, that spirit lives on in every concrete building, every paved road, every bound book, every heated home. Think about the mindset this required. A Roman engineer designing an aqueduct knew he might never see it completed. The project could take decades, spanning multiple emperors, surviving political upheavals and economic crises. Yet he poured his expertise into calculating every angle, every gradient, every joint, knowing that centuries later, people he would never meet would depend on the precision of his work. This raises a question that cuts to the heart of what it means to be human. What does it mean to create something that outlives you? To craft not just for your own lifetime, but for eternity. Most of us live in the immediate present, focused on solving today's problems, meeting this month's deadlines, planning for next year's goals. But the Romans thought in geological time. They built with the assumption that their civilization would last forever, and they wanted their contributions to be worthy of that permanence. There's something deeply moving about this. When Roman architects designed the Pantheon, they weren't just creating a temple for their own generation's worship. They were building a space that would inspire awe in people who wouldn't be born for another 2,000 years. When Roman doctors developed surgical techniques, they weren't just healing soldiers in their own armies. They were advancing medical knowledge that would save lives across centuries. This long-term thinking shaped everything they did. Roman roads weren't built to last a few decades. They were built to last forever. Roman concrete wasn't mixed for convenience. It was formulated to grow stronger with age. Even their everyday innovations, like bound books and central heating, were designed with permanence and improvement in mind. But perhaps the most important lesson from Roman innovation isn't technical, it's philosophical. The Romans believed that human beings deserved comfort, beauty, and efficiency in their daily lives. They believed that civilization should make existence better, not just more organized. They refused to accept that this is just how things are, and instead asked, how can we make this better? This optimism, this faith in human potential to solve problems and improve conditions, is perhaps the most valuable part of their legacy. In our age of rapid change and constant disruption, when everything seems temporary and disposable, the Roman example reminds us of the power of thinking beyond our own lifespans. What if we approached our modern challenges with Roman-level ambition? What if we designed our cities to last 1,000 years instead of a few decades? What if we built our technologies not just for profit, but for permanence? What if we invested in solutions that our great-great-grandchildren would thank us for, even if we never lived to see the results? The Romans weren't superhuman. They made mistakes. They had limitations. They faced the same basic human challenges we face today. How to organize society, how to manage resources, how to create systems that serve human needs. But they approached these challenges with a unique combination of practical engineering skill and visionary long-term thinking. Their concrete still stands because they thought beyond their own era. Their roads still guide our transportation networks because they planned for permanence. Their innovations still improve our lives because they design solutions not just for themselves, but for the future of human civilization. In a world where most of what we build seems destined for obsolescence within a generation, where our technology becomes outdated in months rather than centuries, the Roman legacy challenges us to think bigger, build better, and create things that will serve not just our immediate needs, but the needs of generations yet unborn. The Romans proved that human beings, working together with vision and skill, can create things that transcend their own mortality. They showed us that the highest form of creativity isn't self-expression. It's contribution to the ongoing human story. So the next time you flip a page in a book, drive on a straight road, or step into a warm building on a cold day, take a moment to appreciate the Roman minds that made these simple pleasures possible. And maybe ask yourself, what am I building today that will still matter 1,000 years from now? What lessons can we draw from this ancient tradition? How can their example of building for eternity inspire us to approach our own challenges with greater vision and ambition? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more untold stories of the ancient world. Because understanding where we came from is the first step in deciding where we're going next. The Roman Empire may have fallen, but the Roman spirit of innovation lives on, In every problem we solve, every improvement we make, every time we choose to build something that will outlast our own brief time on this earth. In that sense, we are all Romans now, carrying forward their greatest invention of all, the belief that human ingenuity can make tomorrow better than today.